before the fall, the sun rose over the vast savanna, blood orange against a haze of smoke that drifted from distant volcanic peaks. The land stretched far beyond the horizon, dotted with clusters of trees, winding rivers, and the bones of ancient creatures long buried beneath the dust. Life here was primitive, brutal, beautiful, and balanced. Kael crouched by the edge of the riverbank, his muscles taut, every sense heightened. He held a sharpened stone in his right hand, waiting for the herd of antelope to make their way closer. Around his waist, a belt made of woven sinew carried small pouches, tools of survival. His hair was dark and matted with sweat. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the surroundings with the intelligence of a hunter born into hardship. Behind him, nestled between the roots of a massive fig tree, his tribe stirred. They were a small, tight-knit group, fewer than 50 men, women, and children, the remnants of a lineage that had survived countless storms, beasts, and wars. They called themselves Nuktan, meaning the flame of the earth. Among them was Mira, unlike anyone Kael had ever known. She was not born of his tribe. She had wandered into their camp seasons ago, half dead and covered in ash, the sole survivor of a mountain clan swallowed by lava. Her eyes held the colors of twilight, deep violet and storm gray, and her voice was soft, yet steady like falling rain. Mira believed the world was about to end. She spoke of dreams, visions of the sky cracking open and the land drowning in fire. The elders dismissed her stories as grief-born illusions, but Kael listened. He always listened. Kael, her voice called him now, cutting through the early silence. He turned, startled. She stood at the edge of the forest, silhouetted by the rising sun. Her figure was lean, robed in animal hide stitched with thorns and teeth. In her hands, she held a bundle of herbs, freshly picked, used for cleansing. Her gaze was urgent. Birds are gone, trees silent. The earth holds her breath, she said, almost in a whisper. Kael frowned. He had noticed it too. The water had grown bitter. The winds shifted. The animals restless. But the others would not hear such omens. They feared fear itself more than danger. Still, Kael trusted instincts more than tradition. "What did you see?" he asked. She looked toward the mountains in the west, where a red cloud bloomed on the horizon, like a festering wound. "It begins," she said. By nightfall, the air was thick with ash. A tremor rattled the ground as the tribe feasted around their fire. They sang songs of ancestors, the flames casting wild shadows on the stone faces of nearby cliffs. Children danced, unaware of the death hiding just beyond the trees. Mira sat silently beside Kael, her eyes locked on the stars above. "They shift," she murmured. "The sky changes." He followed her gaze. The stars, they were not right. A bright one moved swiftly, like a falling spear. Then the earth screamed. A deafening roar tore through the night. The ground cracked beneath them. Trees bent and split. Fire poured from the western mountains, glowing rivers racing down their flanks. The bright star was not a star. It was a stone, a god's weapon, tearing through the sky. A meteor, the size of a mountain. It struck the earth with blinding fury far to north, but the tremor of its rage traveled fast. The shockwave arrived like thunder-made flesh. The camp was thrown into chaos. Flames leapt high. Children wailed. Women screamed. Men ran blindly into the forest. The very ground moved like a living beast. Kael grabbed Mira and pulled her toward the river. "This way," he shouted. "We must leave the valley." But behind them, the forest caught fire. Red light lit the darkness as the world convulsed in pain. The tribe scattered, swallowed by smoke, fire, and falling stone. Kael and Mira ran until their legs burned. When they finally collapsed, the forest behind them was gone, reduced to blackness. Above them, ash began to fall like snow. The world, as they had known it, was ending, and they were alone. Fire from the sky. Ash fell like rain. Thick, hot flakes drifted from the sky in choking waves, blanketing the earth in gray. The sun was gone, swallowed by the dust. The blue sky had turned into a ceiling of darkness, tinged with a red glow that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. The air tasted of burnt rock and blood. Kael and Mira stood on a cliff's edge, staring in silent horror, at what remained of their world. Below them, the valley that once held their tribe had become a furnace. Trees had blackened to twisted bones. Smoke spiraled upward like ghosts. The river, their lifeline, had turned to mud, boiling in places. The bones of their kin lay scattered like forgotten offerings. Kael dropped to his knees, fists clenched in the soot. They're gone. Mira remained standing, but her eyes brimmed with sorrow. All paths lead here. I saw it in dreams. The earth she cleanses. He looked up at her, anger flashing in his face. You saw it, and still he stayed. I warned them. They didn't believe. You did. Her voice trembled, but she held his gaze. You ran. You lived. Kael turned his face away, shame and fury mixing inside him. He had always led the hunting parties. He was a shield of the tribe, a spear in the dark. Yet now he could protect nothing, not even a child. Only she remained. He looked back toward the smoldering horizon. The meteor's impact had happened far away, but the destruction was vast. Beyond the visible fire lay a deeper truth. The very balance of the earth had shifted. This wasn't a local disaster. It was the beginning of something far greater, a world-ending event. Where do we go? Kael asked, voice raw. Mira knelt beside him and drew a simple circle in the ash. Around it, she marked jagged lines, rivers, mountains, cliffs. South, she whispered, where the earth still breathes clean, where caves run deep. Kael studied the map with narrowed eyes. It was hundreds of miles away, unfamiliar lands filled with beasts, storms, and worse. Yet there was no other choice. Then we go. For days, they walked through fire. The skies remained dim, ash blocking the sun. The temperature dropped unnaturally fast. The heat of the meteor's rage was fading, replaced by a cold that gnawed at their skin even during daylight. They wore animal skins, but the chill was unlike anything Kael had felt. Nights that should have been warm turned glacial. Even the wind was different. Slower, heavier, mournful. Once, they passed a herd of dead bison, dozens frozen in place, their corpses still upright, eyes glazed with ice. Nearby wolves circled, uncertain whether to feast or flee. Something is wrong with the air, Mira whispered, covering her mouth with a cloth. The sun is dying. Kael said grimly. No, she replied. It hides. Ash covers it. But for how long? They sheltered in shallow caves and under fallen trees. Each night, Kael built fire, a skill now more vital than ever. He guarded the flame like a newborn, feeding it with broken branches and dry moss. Mira taught him to listen, not just for danger, but for signs. She read patterns in birdsong, in the shapes of clouds, in the way water moved over stone. On the sixth night, as they camped beneath the blackened bones of a scorched redwood grove, Mira clutched her chest. Something approaches, she murmured. Kael leapt up and grabbed a spear. He heard it too, low growls echoing in the distance. Glowing eyes appeared in the dark. 5 pairs. Then more. Wolf-like creatures emerged from the shadows. Gaunt, monstrous, with soot-black fur and teeth like daggers. They were not ordinary predators. The ash had changed them, made them bolder, hungrier. Kael stepped in front of Mira, spear ready. The pack circled, snarling. The lead beast lunged. Kael drove his spear into its side, the point sinking deep. The beast let out a shriek and twisted, knocking Kael backward. 2 more leapt toward him. He rolled, dodging one, then slammed a rock into the other's skull. Mira screamed, but not in fear. In fury, she threw a burning branch from their fire into the midst of the pack. It burst in a crackle of flame, scattering sparks. The wolves recoiled, terrified. Kael rose, blood running down his side. He grabbed the torch from Mira's hand and waved it violently, shouting. The beast fled into the shadows. Dawn, if it could still be called that, brought only a pale grayness. Kael's wounds were shallow. Mira cleaned them with herbs and boiled water, her hands gentle, expression unreadable. You were ready to die, she said. He nodded. I have nothing left to protect, except you. Her gaze softened. Then you have everything. They sat in silence, leaning against one another for warmth. The world around them was dead, But they were not, and while breath still filled their lungs, they would walk. South, toward survival, toward hope, if any was left. Ash and ice. The ground grew harder beneath their feet. As Kael and Mira moved farther south, the charred forest gave way to open plains, but the once golden grasses were now buried under a thin layer of ash frost, a mix of soot and early snow. The world had shifted in silence. No bird sang. No insects buzzed. The hum of life was gone. Ice crept in early that year, months before the expected cold. Even the rivers, once wild and flowing, had grown sluggish, their banks frosted and slick. The planet was plunging into darkness, into what Mira now called the sleep of the earth. Volcanic ash-blocked sunlight. Temperatures dropped. Photosynthesis failed. Plants died. The animals followed. Kael and Mira didn't speak much now. Every word meant anything. Every step was calculated. They conserved warmth as if it were gold. Their faces were hardened by wind. Their lips cracked from cold. Their hands, once agile and precise, now trembled from fatigue and frostbite. Yet still they walked. One morning, they came upon a frozen mammoth, a colossus, half submerged in a cracked glacial lake. Its eyes were still open, wide with terror, as though it had fallen into the ice in the midst of a charge. Kael stood before the beast in silence. He had hunted mammoths before with his tribe. It had taken 10 men, ropes, and fire. Now here was one, felled by nature itself. He looked up at Mira. The world is hunting for us now. She nodded, her voice distant. And we are the last prey. They harvested what they could. Thick fur for warmth. Frozen meat for days. Mira used sharpened flint to carve strips from the beast's hide, fashioning thick cloaks. Kael's hands were red with blood and ice, but he worked without pause. This food would save them, or at least buy them time. They built shelter in a nearby crevice, reinforced with mammoth bones and hide. The warmth inside was barely enough, but the fire crackled and flickered. Its glow was the only comfort they had left. That night, Mira had another dream. She sat up suddenly, breath ragged. Kael stirred beside her. "What is it?" Her eyes glistened in the firelight. I saw the future, not in symbols, but in shape. A child, a new beginning, born beneath stone beside water. But it is fragile. It dies unless we move. Kael sat up fully, alert now. Where? She pointed southeast, where the cliffs touched the clouds. A hidden place, warm inside. I saw roots that stretch forever and a spring that never freezes. Kael nodded, without question. He had learned to trust her dreams. They had led them this far. In a world where reason no longer applied, intuition was survival. They traveled through a valley carved by glaciers. Icicles hung like daggers from stone ridges. Frost dusted every surface, turning the world into a grave of silver bones. The cold bit into them even under layers of hide, and the wind howled with the voices of the dead. One afternoon, as they crossed a narrow pass, Mira collapsed. Kael turned in alarm. Mira! She was pale, eyes glassy. Her breath came in shallow bursts. He dropped beside her, pulling her close. Her skin was icy. Her hands trembled. "Sleep," she murmured. "Just for a moment." "No," Kael growled. He shook her, then reached for their satchel, pulling out the last of the dried meat. He pressed it to her lips. "Eat, now." She refused. He lit a fire beside her and wrapped her in every scrap of fur they carried. Then he lay beside her, wrapping his arms tightly around her body, pressing his warmth into her core. "I won't let you die," he whispered. "You're the only thing left alive in this world." By morning, her breath had steadied. Her eyes fluttered open. "Still here," she said with a faint smile. Kael chuckled through cracked lips. "You don't get to leave me yet." Together, they stood and resumed the journey. Each step was agony, but each step was also defiance. The earth wanted silence. It wanted to bury them with the rest, but they refused. At the end of the 7th day, they crested a ridge, and there it was, a deep canyon, hidden beneath the frost, cloaked in ancient trees that somehow remained green. Steam rose from vents in the ground, geothermal springs. Beneath the roots of the largest tree, a cave mouth yawned open, promising shelter. They had found it, the place from Mira's vision, a place the ice had not claimed, a chance, maybe the last, the silent earth. The canyon below was unlike anything Kael had seen. While the rest of the world froze and burned, this hidden place breathed. Mist swirled in the air, warm and scented with minerals. Ancient ferns clung to life beneath the shadows of towering trees. The soil was soft, damp, and dark. Water trickled from rock walls, steaming where it touched the frozen air above. It was a secret world, untouched by the apocalypse, a breath of Earth's old memory. Kael and Mira stood at the canyon's edge for a long time, staring down. Then, wordless, they descended. They moved slowly, testing every step. The slope was steep and slick, but the deeper they went, the more life they found. Insects buzzed faintly. Moss blanketed stones. A small bird darted past Kael's shoulder, the first winged creature they had seen in weeks. Mira knelt beside a trickling stream and placed her hand in it. "It's warm," she whispered. Kael looked around, wary. "Why here? Why only this place?" Mira didn't answer immediately. She looked up at the rock walls surrounding them. The earth remembers. Not all of her wants us gone. This is her last kindness. They made their shelter beneath the roots of a colossal tree, a titan that had survived fire, frost, and time. Its trunk was wide enough to hold a dozen men shoulder to shoulder. Its roots twisted through the earth like sleeping serpents, curling around stone and soil alike. The cave beneath the tree was shallow but dry. Kael cleared debris while Mira gathered reeds and fern for bedding. They used branches from the outer rim of the forest for firewood, careful not to harm the inner grove. For the first time in weeks, Kael slept without fear and dreamed. In his vision, Kael walked through a world of light and shadow. He saw the ancestors, thousands of them, standing beneath the stars, looking to the sky. Then came the fire, the roar of earth tearing open, the scream of the wind. But from the ashes, two figures stood, a man and a woman, surrounded by flame. One held fire, the other held life, and behind them, children, a new beginning. He woke with tears frozen to his cheeks. The days passed in rhythm. Each morning, Kael and Mira hunted small animals that still lingered in the warmth. Burrowing rodents, tree lizards, strange birds. Mira dug roots and gathered mushrooms. They boiled water from the spring, soaked herbs, built new tools from stone and bone. Kael built a trap for fish in the stream. Mira painted symbols on the cave wall, charcoal lines, spirals, handprints. Together, they wove baskets and hardened clay bowls over flame. They were not merely surviving now. They were living. But the silence of the earth was never far. Sometimes, Kael would climb the canyon wall to scan the horizon. From the heights, he could see the world beyond, a frozen plain, gray and endless. The sun remained weak, a pale eye behind a veil of smoke. They saw no other people, heard no other cries. Not a single trail, fire, or voice echoed from the beyond. They were alone. Truly, one day, Mira sat staring into fire. "What if we are the last?" she asked. Kael stared into the flames. "Then we must not fail." She turned to him, her face lit by the soft flicker. "We are not gods, Kael. We are broken, scarred. What if the world does not want us?" He took her hand, rough and strong and warm in his. "Then we make the world want us." As the moons passed, the warmth of the canyon remained. Kael grew stronger, Mira bolder. They laughed again. They sang fragments of the old songs, though no one remained to remember them. They made new ones. On the night of the first snow beyond the canyon, Kael looked at Mira and saw something new in her eyes. Peace, hope, and something else, a glow beneath her ribs, a secret she had not yet spoken. He leaned in. "What is it?" Mira took his hand and placed it gently against her belly. "There is life," she whispered. "A new fire." Kael stared at her, speechless. They were not just the last. They were the first. The long walk. The cold wind cut through their furs like knives. Before the warmth of the hidden canyon, before the fire under the roots of the ancient tree, there was a journey, a walk across a wounded earth. A journey not measured in days, but in pain, in silence, in steps. Kael remembered the long walk as fragments, red skies, cracked bones, frozen rivers. Every morning, they woke beneath ash. Every night, they slept with blades in their hands. The earth offered no mercy, and yet they walked. The first days were the hardest. Kael's ribs ached with hunger. His feet bled. Mira coughed ash into her hands, hiding it from him. But they didn't stop. South was their only word. South meant warmth. South meant life. They followed the stars at night, or what little of them they could see through the clouded sky. Mira charted their path by the bend of hills, the flow of broken rivers, the shape of fallen trees. Twice they crossed plains littered with the dead, herds of deer, elk, even saber-toothed cats, all frozen where they stood, their fur caked with frost, mouths open in silent screams. Once, they saw a sky cave open in the distance, the mouth of a volcano erupting black smoke that curled like a serpent toward the heavens. Kael tightened his grip on his spear. "We are too small," he whispered, "too weak to fight what is coming." Mira looked at him, her face caked in soot, her eyes unwavering. "Then we become more." The days blurred together. They drank snow when they couldn't find water, ate bark when they couldn't catch game. Fire was their only god. They prayed to it with every spark. Kael became something else in that walk. Not just a hunter, but a guardian. His body grew leaner, his instincts sharper. He walked slightly ahead of Mira at all times, eyes sweeping for threats. He didn't sleep fully, just enough to heal. Mira, too, changed. She no longer feared the silence. She embraced it. She began to hum strange tones at night, melodies without words, like lullabies for the earth. She spoke to birds, even when none were there. She whispered to rivers, though they made no sound. Kael never interrupted her. He knew better. On the 12th night, they came upon a cave carved into the cliffside, shaped like a wolf's mouth. Inside, the walls were covered in drawings, handprints, animals, spirals, moons. The markings were old, very old. "This was once a home," Mira said, running her fingers along the stone. From before to before, maybe even older than us." They lit a fire and ate roasted roots and dried meat. Mira sat close to Kael, her head against his shoulder. For a while, they said nothing. Then she spoke. "You don't ask about my clan," she said softly. "I figure you'll tell me when it's time." She looked into the fire, eyes distant. "They died in lava. A mountain fell on us. I was away, gathering plants. When I returned, they were stone." Kael placed his hand over hers. "I buried them with rocks. I sang the old words. But I didn't cry." Her voice broke. "I forgot how." Kael leaned closer. "Then I will cry for both of us." Mira closed her eyes. "That is why I follow you. You are made of fire, but you walk like water, strong but gentle." They left the cave the next morning. The air grew colder, the sky darker, but their hearts stronger. They moved as one now, not two survivors, but two halves of something new, a rhythm, a bond forged not just by suffering, but by trust. Once, they were chased by starving dire wolves. They ran for miles, cutting through a stone pass until Kael rolled a boulder to block the path. Another time, a hailstorm struck without warning. Mira shielded Kael beneath her cloak, her body trembling, teeth chattering, but she never let go of his hand. Then came the day they saw it, steam rising from the hidden canyon. Mira dropped to her knees. "It's real," she whispered. "The dream, it's real." Kael helped her up. Together, they descended. Now, in the present, Mira lay beneath firs in her cave, her hand resting on her belly. Kael knelt beside her, stroking her hair. "I still see the walk when I close my eyes," he said. "Every step, every death." "And yet we lived," she murmured. "No," he said. "We were reborn." Outside, snow still fell, but in their cave, a fire danced. And inside Mira, a spark. Creatures of the night. The warm cave beneath the ancient tree had become their sanctuary. Here, time passed differently. Seasons outside froze, but within, life stirred. Myra's belly had begun to swell, subtly, but enough for Kael to notice. He spoke less now and watched her more, quietly calculating what she would need. He hunted twice as much, gathered twice as far, built spears with sharper stone, fletched darts tipped with poison sap. They had something to protect now, but they weren't alone. It began with silence, not the ordinary quiet of falling snow or sleeping earth, but something deeper. Wrong. One night, as the fire crackled low and Mira drifted into sleep, Kael sat watch. He stared at the mouth of their cave. Beyond it, the darkness shifted, moved. Then it stopped. He squinted. Nothing. Still his skin prickled. The next morning, tracks appeared in the ash-dusted soil. Not human, not wolf, larger, three-toed, clawed. The distance between each step was wide. Whatever it was, it moved quickly, powerfully. Kael crouched low, examining the trail. The prints circled their cave, not once but 3 times, then vanished into the mist beyond the stream. Not predator, he muttered to himself. Scout. Mira approached silently, cradling her belly. It watches, she said, her voice thin. It knows we are warm. Kael nodded. We stay inside tonight. No firelight, no singing. Mira hesitated. Fire keeps it away. Kael looked at her, or draws it near. That night, a low growl rolled through the canyon. Kael's hand tightened around his spear. Mira sat with her back to the wall, eyes wide in the dark. Outside, heavy steps crushed ice and gravel. Then silence. Kael whispered, "Don't move." A shadow passed before the cave's entrance. Huge, hunched. It sniffed the air. Then a sound that turned Kael's blood cold. Snort, scratch, shriek. It was calling others. Kael's mind raced. If it entered the cave, they had no room to fight. Not with Mira unable to run. He crawled slowly to the side wall, where he had stored a bundle of dry pitchwood. He dipped a cloth in animal fat, wrapped it around a branch, and struck flint. Flick, flick, FSSSSD. Fire flared. The creature outside screamed, high-pitched and unnatural, more bird than beast. A moment later, the cave shook as something slammed against it. Stone crumbled. Kael grabbed Myra's arm. Out the back. The tunnel. They scrambled through a narrow passage behind the main chamber. A crawl space Kael had dug as an emergency route. Behind them, the creature roared and lunged again, this time cracking the edge of the wall. A claw reached through, long and black, tipped with bone. Kael shoved Mira ahead. The tunnel was barely wide enough for one person. Dirt rained from above as the beast thrashed the cave behind them. They emerged into cold night air on the far side of the canyon. Kael pulled Mira into the trees and turned back. The cave, their home, was collapsing. The creature stood before it now, sniffing the stone. It resembled a massive reptilian hound, covered in soot-dark scales and fur in patches. Its eyes glowed red in the firelight. Its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of teeth curved backward, designed not to bite but to drag. It howled, and the hills answered. 2 more shadows appeared on the ridgeline. Kael whispered, "They hunt in packs." Mira clutched her belly. Then we must move before they circle again. For 3 nights they hid. Kael led Mira deeper into the forested pockets of the canyon. He built new shelters each dusk, destroyed them at dawn. They never slept twice in the same place. He marked trees with symbols of track, which direction the beasts came from. Mira mixed sap and moss to create camouflage. The creatures, they were relentless, always near, never seen, until the 4th night. Kael laid a trap. He dug a pit near a trail where footprints were fresh. He covered it with fern mats and brittle branches, baited with blood from a rabbit. He and Mira watched from the trees. Hours passed. Then a rustle. The lead beast crept forward, nose twitching. It moved slowly, cautiously. But hunger overpowered instinct. Snap, crash, roar. The ground gave way. The creature fell. Kael leapt from his perch and hurled a spear. It struck the beast in the throat. It screamed. The scream called the others. Kael turned and shouted, "Run!" He and Mira fled as the forest behind them exploded in noise. Snarls, snapping branches, clawed feet pounding the ground. But the pit gave them time. The beasts were disoriented, confused, enraged. By the time they reached a hot spring cave, a smaller shelter Kael had discovered days earlier, the noise had faded. Kael collapsed beside Mira, gasping. They were alive, barely. For days, they remained hidden. The beast did not return. Mira placed her hand on her belly. "It moved," she whispered. Kael looked at her. The child, she smiled. "It kicks." He smiled for the first time in days. "The earth may be silent," he said, "but something still sings." Cave of Echoes. Days passed without the beast returning. The forest quieted once more, but Kael never lowered his guard. Every noise was a warning, every breeze a whisper. Yet beneath his hardened instincts, a new feeling had begun to grow. Curiosity. They had nearly died. Again, but something Mira had said echoed in his mind. "This isn't the first time." She hadn't explained. Not yet. They had relocated to a smaller cavern, protected by stone ledges and veiled by a curtain of vines. Warm from underground springs, steam from cracks in the floor. A soft hum resonated through the cave walls, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Kael noticed the sounds first. Low, pulsing, repeating. One night, while Mira slept, he pressed his ear to the stone. He hum. It was not random, not natural. It felt like a signal. The next day, they ventured deeper into the cave. It wound downward, spiraling like a serpent's spine. The air grew warmer, thicker. Steam clung to their skin. Strange blue moss grew on the walls, glowing faintly. Water dripped from above, echoing endlessly. Then they found it, a chamber, wide, domed, hidden deep in the earth. And on its walls, stories. Painted in red, black, and ochre were figures, humanoid but not quite. Eyes too large, limbs too long. They stood beside symbols of fire, animals, storms, and skies raining stone. Kael stepped forward, eyes wide. "It's a warning," Mira whispered, her fingers tracing a spiral sun drawn above a mountain cracking open. Another world-ending event. Not ours. Older. How old? Kael asked. She shook her head. Before speech. Before names. They stood in silence, trying to comprehend what they were seeing. Beneath the painted stars, there were more images. Figures fleeing, hiding in caves. Then, two figures remained. Alone, a man and a woman. One carried fire, the other a seed. Kael turned to Mira. "It's us." Mira nodded slowly. "It has always been us. Every time." That night, Kael sat by the underground spring, watching ripples flicker in the water. He thought of the stories painted in stone, not myths, but messages, echoes left behind. He imagined other apocalypses, other survivors. Were they buried now? Or had they birthed the ancestors of the world that had just died again? Were he and Mira the last or the latest? Mira sat beside him, belly round now, glowing in firelight. What if the earth doesn't want us to continue? Kael asked, what if these cycles are her way of starting over without us? Mira looked into the spring. Then she wouldn't have spared this place, or the seed inside me. Kael stared into the darkness, still uncertain. We are not just surviving, Mira said. We are chosen, or remembered. He turned to her. What do you mean? She placed a hand on her stomach. I have dreamed the child's name. He will walk where no man has walked. Speak to beasts. Read stone. But only if he is born beneath the old stars, the ones above the mountains. Kael frowned. We'll never get that far. We will, she said, standing, because this cave has a path. The next morning, Mira led him deeper, past the murals. They found a tunnel, not natural, carved, with lines too straight, angles too clean. At its end, a great door of stone, not blocked, not locked, just heavy. Together, they pushed. Stone groaned. A shaft of cold light pierced the dark. They stepped through into open sky, high on a ridge overlooking the entire valley. From this perch, they saw everything. The snowfields, the steaming rivers, and far, Far in the distance, a line of mountains scraping the heavens. Mira placed Kael's hand on her belly. "There," she said. "That's where he must be born." Kael didn't ask how she knew anymore. He just nodded. Far below, the earth still whispered. Far above, the sky was beginning to clear, and the stars, the old stars, began to return. Language of survival. The winds changed. They blew softer now, warmer, no longer filled with ash, but with mist and the distant scent of growth. Something in the earth was shifting, not fast, but enough to feel. A slow awakening beneath layers of cold and grief. Mira sat beside a flat slab of stone near the edge of their new shelter. In her hands, she held a piece of blackened charcoal. She pressed the stone and drew a shape, a spiral inside a triangle, circled by 3 dots. Kael watched her. "What does it mean?" he asked. She looked at him, smiling faintly. "It means we lived." They had begun making symbols, first for memories, then for meanings. Kael, always a practical one, had carved a tally of days into a tree bark, scratches that marked how long they had traveled, when the beast attacked, when Mira first felt the child kick. But Mira went deeper. Her symbols told stories of fire, stars, the long walk, the creatures in the night. They were not mere marks. They were language being born. "Why?" Kael asked one evening, as she drew on the cave wall by torchlight. She didn't answer at first. Then, for the one who comes after, they began assigning sounds of things. A particular whistle meant danger. A grunt followed by a hum meant food near. They created gestures for move now, wait, follow. It was instinct at first, but soon it became deliberate. Kael invented a sharp click with his tongue to mean freeze. It saved them from a falling rock slide. Mira created a melodic hum to suit the unborn child. One night, Kael stood at the fire, watching the smoke rise. He turned to Mira and made a sweeping motion across the air with his fingers. She raised her brow. "What's that?" Kael repeated it, then pointed to the stars. Mira's eyes widened. "Sky." He nodded. She smiled. And thus, a word was born. They named things now, not just to survive, but to know. The tall tree near the stream became Sharon, the sheltering one. The place where the wolves howl became Kreth, Death's mouth. The river was Luma, she who runs. Kael gave Mira a name only he would use, Ayari, the fire that sings. Mira, in turn, gave Kael the name Torwin, the shield that walks. They were more than names. They were beginnings. Mira taught Kael a ritual she remembered from her lost mountain tribe, a gesture made with 2 fingers crossed over the heart, done before sleep. It meant, "If I don't wake, remember me." Kael changed it. He crossed his fingers and then touched hers. "If you don't wake," he said, "I will still walk with you." She wept, but not from sorrow. One afternoon, as Kael fished at the river, Mira painted the child, a small figure, held between 2 larger ones, a flame in his hand, waves at his feet, above him, stars, behind him, a sun. She added the symbol for a first breath, then the mark for a watcher. Kael returned and stared at the image in silence. He placed his hand beside hers on the wall. "His name?" he asked. Mira closed her eyes. "Tamo." Kael repeated it slowly. "Tamo." Mira nodded. "It means echo of fire." Kael whispered the name again like a vow. That night, the stars returned brighter than before. Kael and Mira lay beneath the open sky, wrapped in skins, the fire between them low and steady. "We were never meant to survive," Kael said. Mira turned to him. "No one is. That's why we must create." He looked at her. "You've built more than shelter," he said. "You've built memory." She smiled. "So we're not forgotten." And in that silent, sacred night, somewhere between fire and stars, between heartbeat and breath, a language was born, not of grammar or rules, but of need, of hope, of truth, the first language of humanity. And it began with 2 voices, alone, together, hope and fire. The fire was dying. The cave, once a cradle of warmth, now felt brittle and empty. The skies above turned gray again. not from ash, but from storm. Thunder rolled like the groan of some waking god. Trees bent under wind like grass before flood. Mira clutched her stomach and hissed through her teeth. Kael knelt beside her. Worry chiseled deep into his face. "It's soon," she whispered. He nodded, but in the wind, he heard more than storm. Footsteps, not beasts, not animals, others. The firelight flickered in rhythm with Mira's breaths. She was in pain now, real, unrelenting. Kael had made a bed of hides and moss, laid hot stones nearby, and stacked sharpened sticks near the cave entrance. Outside, thunder cracked and was answered, not by lightning, but by a roar. Kael stepped outside. Across the clearing, shadows moved. Silhouettes, broad, hunched, limping, emerged from the forest's edge. Survivors, but not like them. These were broken, twisted by starvation and time. Their skin hung loose, faces sunken. Their eyes burned not with hunger for food, but for ownership, for claim. Kael raised a spear. They hissed. 4 of them. One carried a sharpened femur as a weapon. Another dragged a net of bones. A third wore a necklace of teeth. The 4th, tall, silent, carried nothing, but his eyes locked with Kael's. Challenge. Alpha to alpha. Kael stepped forward. "You have no fire," he said, voice low. They did not understand his words, but they felt their meaning. "You come to take," Kael said, "but there is nothing here for you." The tall one stepped forward. Kael's hand gripped his spear tighter. Inside, Mira screamed. The child was coming. Lightning shattered the sky. The wind howled. The first scavenger lunged. Kael didn't hesitate. He ducked, drove the spear upward, straight through the attacker's chest. The second came from the side. Swinging bone. Kael spun, broke its wrist with stone, and crushed its skull. The third tried to run. Too late. Kael caught him. His rage, his fear, his love, all became weapon. When the last, the tall one, stepped forward, Kael was covered in blood. The tall man didn't move. He just stared and then slowly knelt. Hands open. Surrender. Kael pointed to the forest. The tall man rose and disappeared into the trees. Kael stumbled back into the cave. Mira was screaming, but not in pain, in birth. Kael dropped to her side. Tears streamed from her eyes. "Now," she gasped. "He's coming." Kael held her, steadied her, helped guide the child into the world. It was not easy, but nothing had been. Then, in the middle of firelight and storm and silence, a cry, not Mira's, not Kael's, a new voice, small, fierce, alive. Kael cradled him. A boy, eyes wide, hair dark, skin warm. He blinked at the fire and smiled. Mira reached for him. "Tomo," she whispered. Kael held them both. The storm howled outside, but it no longer mattered. Hope had been born. In blood, in fire, in defiance of extinction. They wrapped the child in hides. Mira sang a soft tune, old words from a language lost to time. Kael added wood to the fire and etched a new symbol on the wall. A flame, a tree, a child between. That night, they didn't sleep. They watched over Tomo. The last spark of humankind. The first of something greater. The echo of fire. The first path. Dawn broke with fragile light, pale and trembling as if the sun itself feared to rise fully. Kael held Tomo close, feeling the soft warmth of the child's breath against his skin. Mira sat nearby, exhausted but steady, her eyes scanning the horizon. The world beyond her cave was still fragile, scarred and uncertain, but alive. The hidden canyon had given them a fragile sanctuary, but now the time had come to move. The distant mountains called to Mira's dreams, promising shelter and life. Kael rose and stretched, the aches in his body sharp reminders of the relentless journey that lay ahead. He lifted a bundle of carefully wrapped supplies, dried meat, sharpened flint, woven fibers, and strapped it across his back. Mira gathered her own belongings and wrapped Tomo snugly against her chest, the baby's fingers twitching in sleep. They stood together at the cave entrance. The storm clouds from the night before it cleared, revealing a sky that was beginning to blaze with soft golds and pinks. "Are you ready?" Kael asked softly. Mira nodded. We have to be. Their footsteps stirred the fresh earth beneath them as they stepped into the cool morning air. The canyon stretched out before them. Trees tall and ancient, shadows deep but filled with promise. Kael led the way, spear in hand, eyes alert for any sign of danger. Mira's fingers curled tightly around Tomo, humming a low melody to soothe the child and herself. The path was rugged, steep climbs, tangled roots, slippery rocks. But with each step, the cold grip of the past apocalypse loosened its hold. Life whispered in the breeze and the rustle of leaves. Small creatures darted just beyond sight. The scent of earth and pine filled their lungs. As they walked, Mira paused often, touching strange plants, collecting roots and berries. She taught Kael how to identify what was safe to eat and what to avoid. Together, they learned again how to listen to the forest, to read its subtle signs. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, they reached a rocky ridge overlooking a wide valley. Mist curled over distant rivers and far-off trees. Beyond the valley rose the jagged silhouettes of the mountains, the place Mira had dreamed of. Kael knelt and traced a circle in the dirt with a spear. We make camp here tonight. Mira smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Tomo's face. Tomorrow we cross. That night, beneath the stars, they sat beside a fire, its glow soft but fierce. Kael looked at Mira, his eyes reflecting both hope and weariness. We are small, he said, but we carry the world inside us. Mira nodded, her hand resting on her belly, already remembering the long walk that brought them here, and the longer journey still ahead. Tomo stirred, opening eyes wide and curious, the echo of fire flickering bright. Shadows on the trail. The morning mist clung thick to the valley floor as Kael, Mira, and little Tomo began their journey beyond the safety of the canyon. The air was crisp, carrying scent of earth and damp leaves, but something else lingered beneath, a quiet tension, like the world itself was holding its breath. Kael led with spear ready, eyes scanning every shadow. Mira kept Tomo close, humming soft tunes to steady the child breaths. The forest grew dense. Sunlight filtered through tangled branches, dappling the path with flickering light. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of a leaf seemed magnified in the heavy silence. Suddenly, a flash of movement, a pair of glowing eyes watching from the underbrush. Kael froze, signaling Mira to stay still. A low growl rumbled nearby. Not the friendly creatures they had known, but something new, darker, more cunning. They moved cautiously, making slow progress as the tension mounted. The shadows lengthened and unfamiliar sounds echoed through the trees. Distant snarls, faint howls, the snap of branches. Mira whispered, "They're hunting." Kael nodded grimly. When not alone, that night, they made camp in a hollow beneath a fallen tree. The fire was small but fierce, a fragile shield against the dark. Kael kept watch, spear in hand, while Mira tended to Tomo. Suddenly, a branch snapped close by. Kael's muscles tensed. From the shadows, two figures emerged, wild, desperate, eyes burning with hunger and fear. They were survivors like Kael and Mira, but twisted by hardship, driven by a fierce will survive. Words failed, but gestures spoke volumes. There was caution, then recognition, the shared understanding of those who had seen the end of the world. Together, they faced the shadows, threats that stalked the forest, and the fragile hope of a new beginning. Bonds forged in fire. The night air was thick with tension as Kael, Mira, and the two strangers sat huddled near the dying embers of the fire. The new companions, Tara, a fierce woman with scarred hands, and Kor, a silent but watchful man, shared wary glances, each sizing up the other. Survival had shaped them all differently, but the hunger in their eyes was the same. Kael broke the silence. We face the same dangers. Alone we fall. Mira nodded. Together, we might have a chance. Over the next days, the small group shared stories in broken gestures and sounds. Tara showed how to track the new predators that prowled the forest. Kor taught silent movements to avoid detection. Trust was fragile but growing. When a pack of the reptilian hounds attacked, it was the strength of their combined skills that saved them. Kael's spear, Mira's swift moves, Tara's traps, and Kor's calm watchfulness turned hunters into the hunted. That night, around the fire, they carved symbols into stone, marks of unity, survival, and hope. Tamo's first smile greeted the circle, a beacon in the darkness. Kael looked at the faces around him, feeling a flicker of something long lost. Family. The mountain secret. The journey toward the distant mountains tested them in every way. Steep cliffs, thin air, and relentless cold. Yet each step brought hope closer. One evening, as the sun dipped behind jagged peaks, Mira spotted something unusual. Half-buried stones carved with strange symbols. They were not natural formations, but remnants of a forgotten place. Kael cleared debris to reveal a low stone wall, covered in faded paintings depicting great feasts, towering figures, and fires that burned without smoke. Tara traced a hand along the carvings. Before us, others lived here. Kor nodded grimly, and they left warnings. Deeper into the ruins, they found a chamber, walls lined with stone tablets etched with stories of survival, destruction, and rebirth. The air was thick with the weight of time. Mira touched one tablet gently. We are not the first. Kael stared at the images. Humans like them, but different. Wise, lost, and remembered only by stone. The mountain held secrets. Secrets that might shape their future or warn them away. Chapter 14, Fires of Knowledge. The ancient ruins whispered their secrets as Kael, Mira, and their companions studied the stone tablets. The carvings depicted tools, symbols, and rituals. Knowledge left behind by a civilization that had faced apocalypse before. Mira traced a symbol resembling fire entwined with water. They learned to control the elements. Tara nodded. They built fires that did not burn forests. They hunted with respect. Kor gathered sharpened stones and tried to mimic the techniques shown. Slowly, they began to craft tools stronger and more precise than before. By the firelight, Mira taught the group new ways to communicate, combining symbols, sounds, and gestures into a primitive language that could be shared and remembered. Kael stood watch over the flickering flames, feeling a new sense of purpose. The child, Tamo, reached out to the glowing embers with curious eyes. This knowledge is our inheritance, Kael said. We are the keepers now. Mira smiled, and the builders of what comes next. As night fell, the fire crackled brighter, a beacon in the dark, a promise of survival and hope. The gathering storm. The wind shifted, colder and sharper than before. Dark clouds gathered over the mountains, rumbling like distant drums of war. The fragile peace they had found trembled under the weight of coming danger. Kael stood atop a ridge, spear in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. Mira clutched Tamo close, her face pale but determined. The others readied weapons, sharpened stones, and reinforced their shelters. We have learned much, Kael said, but the world still tests us. Tara's eyes narrowed. The beasts grow restless. The shadows lengthen. Kor nodded silently, listening to the forest's whispered warnings. As storms loomed, the group prepared. They set traps, built watchfires, and shared stories to steel their courage. In the heart of the ruins, the ancient knowledge became their shield. Mira looked to Kael. Whatever comes, we face it together. Kael smiled, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. For Tamo, for the future, the storm was coming, and they would stand against it. Chapter 16, Trials of Fire. The sky darkened as a fierce storm rolled down from the mountains, rattling the trees and pounding the earth. But the true trial was not the weather. It was the pack that came with it. The reptilian hounds, larger and more vicious than ever, surged through the forest, driven by hunger and rage. Their glowing red eyes pierced the darkness, their snarls echoing like thunder. Kael stood at the forefront, spear ready. Mira held Tamo close, chanting the ancient melodies that had calmed the wild before. Tara and Kor flanked Kael, wielding sharpened spears and traps made from stone and bone. The battle was brutal and desperate. Flames from the campfires flickered wildly as the beasts crashed against the fences. Kael's spear struck true, but more came, relentless, fierce, unyielding. Myra's voice rose in song, weaving a shield of sound and spirit around them. Tamo's cries mixed with the chaos, a reminder of what was at stake. When dawn finally broke, the forest was silent. The pack was scattered or defeated, but the cost was great. Wounds bled and spirits wearied. Kael looked at Mira, and knew the fight was far from over. The new dawn, the first light of dawn, spilled gently over the horizon, casting soft gold across the battered camp. The forest, once trembling with the roar of battle, now breathed quietly, a fragile peace settling in the aftermath. Kael moved slowly, tending to his wounds with practiced care. Mira sat nearby, cradling Tamo, whose bright eyes shone like embers of promise in the morning light. Tara and Kor worked together to rebuild shelters, their hands steady despite exhaustion. The fight had tested them, but it had also forged them anew. They gathered by the fire, sharing quiet words and renewed purpose. Kael looked to the sky and spoke softly. "We have faced the darkness. We are still here. We will rise." Mira smiled, her voice steady. "The child will grow strong. We will teach him the old ways and the new." As the sun climbed higher, warming the earth, the world seemed to breathe with them. Hope had returned, and with it, the promise of tomorrow, the journey forward. With the storm behind them and hope renewed, Kael, Mira, Tara, Kor, and little Tamo prepared to leave the ruined camp. The mountain peaks loomed ahead, tall, mysterious, and full of promise. Each step was careful but determined. The land was rugged, but the group moved as one, a small family bound by fire and survival. Mira hummed the ancient songs, and Tamo cooed softly, comforted by the sound. Along the way, they discovered signs of ancient life. Stone carvings, buried tools, and the whispers of those who had walked before. Kael pressed a hand to the cool earth, feeling the weight of history beneath their feet. "We walk not just for ourselves," he said, "but for all who come after." Night after night, under the vast stars, they shared stories and dreams of the future. Though the path was uncertain, their hearts were steadfast. They were the last two and the first new beginning. The mountain's heart. The jagged peaks of the sacred mountains rose like ancient sentinels, sharp against the pale sky. After weeks of arduous travel, the group finally stood at their base, breathless and weary, but filled with awe. The air grew thinner and colder, the wind howling through narrow passes. Strange carvings adorned stone pillars, hinting at rituals long forgotten. The mountain's heart, a hidden cavern rumored to hold the key to survival, awaited. Kael tightened his grip on a spear. Mira cradled Tamo, whose curious eyes reflected the flickering torchlight. Together, they began the ascent. As they climbed, the path narrowed and shadows deepened. The silence was thick, broken only by the crunch of their steps and distant echoes. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the ground. Rocks tumbled. Kael shouted, "Move!" They scrambled forward as boulders crashed behind them, blocking the way back. The mountain had claimed its challenge. Inside a vast cavern, glowing with faint blue crystals, they discovered ancient paintings, tales of survival, sacrifice, and rebirth etched into the walls. Mira traced a figure holding a child, flames rising behind them. "This is our story," she whispered. Kael nodded. "The mountain's heart beats with us." With the past and future entwined, they prepared to face whatever lay deeper within, the true test of their journey, the trial within. The cavern's glow deepened as Kael, Mira, Tara, Kor, and little Tamo stepped further into the mountain's heart. The air was thick with silence and ancient power, as if the stone itself remembered every breath ever taken within these walls. Ahead, shadows twisted and coalesced into a towering figure, an ancient guardian carved from stone and living rock, eyes blazing like molten fire. Kael tightened his grip on his spear. Mira held Tamo close, her voice steady as she whispered the old songs passed down through forgotten times. The guardian stirred, its voice a low rumble shaking the cavern. "Who dares seek the mountain's heart?" The group stood firm. Kael stepped forward. "We are the last survivors. We come seeking hope for the child, for all who come after." The guardian's eyes flared. "Prove your worth." The trial began. Through tests of courage, wisdom, and unity, the group faced illusions of their deepest fears and memories of past apocalypses. Only by trusting each other, embracing their pain, and holding on to hope did they advance. At the trial's end, the guardian bowed. "You have passed. The mountain's secrets are yours." From the heart of the cavern, a pool of glowing water appeared, its surface shimmering with the promise of life, healing, and renewal. Mira cupped the water, letting it drip onto Tamo's tiny hands. Kael smiled. A new beginning. Chapter 21. The Promise of Tomorrow. The journey back to the mountain's mouth was filled with a quiet reverence. The glowing water, safely stored in a carved stone vessel, pulsed gently with life, a sacred gift from the mountain's heart. Kael, Mira, Tara, and Kor moved steadily, their steps lighter despite the rough terrain. Little Tamo slept peacefully, unaware of the weight he carried, the hope of all humanity. As they emerged into the light, the first rays of dawn touched the valley below, painting the land with gold and promise. The storms had passed, leaving the world refreshed, ready for rebirth. Mira lifted the vessel, letting the sacred water spill onto the earth. Green shoots burst forth where the drops fell, life stirring once more. Kael knelt, touching the soil with reverence. This is the beginning. Together, the small group set to work, planting, teaching, and building a future from the ashes of the past. The ancient knowledge and the mountain's gift would guide them. Tamo's eyes sparkled with curiosity and light. The echo of fire passed on. The world was broken, but not beyond healing. Chapter 22, Legacy of the Last Two. Years passed beneath the endless sky, and the small community grew, not just in numbers, but in strength and wisdom. Kael and Mira taught Tamo the language of survival, and the stories etched in stone. They shared the sacred knowledge from the mountain and the power of the glowing water that healed the earth. Tamo grew tall and curious, his eyes reflecting the fire that once sparked their journey. He learned to read the symbols his parents had created, to speak the words that bound them together, and to listen to the whispers of the wind and earth. The land flourished beneath their care. Forests grew thick, rivers ran clear, and animals returned. The legacy of the last two became the foundation of new tribes, new languages, and new hopes. In the quiet moment around the fire, Kael and Mira spoke of the future, a world shaped by those who dared survive, to remember, and to rebuild. The story of the last two was no longer just theirs. It was humanity's first light, the echo of fire that would burn through time.